Hey everybody, Dave here with part 2 of my overview for the Abomination Vaults Adventure Path for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. If you have not viewed part 1 of this series, I recommend you go watch that before continuing on here. I will leave a link to it in the description of this video. And also, I should just remind everybody that both this video and the first part are both intended for GMs. If you're a player, I highly recommend not watching any further of this video or watching the previous video, as there are spoilers throughout, and this is intended for the GMs out there. So part 1 was kind of an objective overview of the 3-book Abomination Vaults Adventure Path, and this follow-up video, I become more subjective. I share more about what my opinions are. I'll also share my experience running probably 3/4 to 4/5 of the first book of this adventure path, and also share some of the challenges and pitfalls I faced, and I'll also address some questions that were left in the comments section of the first video. So with all that in mind, let's go ahead and dive in. First of all, my subjective opinion of the Abomination Vaults Adventure Path is it's fantastic. I very, very much enjoyed reading it. So far, I have very much enjoyed GMing it. It is a massive dungeon crawl. And so this is an area where your mileage may vary. For me, I am an old school D&D player. I started playing in 1984 with the basic D&D set. I love my dungeon crawls. As a player is my favorite kind of game to play. As a GM is my favorite kind of game to GM. I have a table full of players who love exploring dungeons, killing monsters, and collecting treasure. And I very much enjoy running combat encounters and handing out treasure. So this is a great fit for me and my table. But it is, again, worth mentioning that your mileage may vary. If you are a person, or if your table is interested in very, very heavy narrative interpersonal role-playing, if your table loves the dining room scenes in a castle where you get to play the room and get to know everybody and meet, greet, and manipulate other characters, I won't say that there's no opportunity for diplomacy and that kind of storytelling in Abomination Vaults, but it is certainly a backseat to dungeon crawling, dungeon exploration, finding and avoiding traps, killing monsters, and getting treasure. That sort of old school vibe. With regards to difficulty for this campaign, so far my players have not had insurmountable problems with the campaign. They have been challenged, they've been pushed. I will say it is a 5-member party, and 3 of those 5 people in that party have some manner of healing ability to them, and they used every bit of it. Now, as for some of the challenges that I have faced so far in GMing this, again, I overwhelmingly love and support Abomination Vaults. I recommend it to anybody who likes dungeon crawls, but that doesn't mean that there weren't some areas that were a little bit challenging. The first of those is this is a multi-level dungeon. It's the so-called super dungeon or mega dungeon, and it goes several levels below the ground. Now, in order to access the first below the ground level, there are a couple of different ways to get from the top level into the basement, so to speak. And one of those points of entry is not a hidden door. That in and of itself is not problematic. What is problematic is if you go down that particular stairwell, you can pretty much bypass the second floor underground and go immediately to floor 3, which players may not have the experience, the level, and the gear needed to really be effective on that 3rd level at the time they find that staircase up on the 1st level. This particular point of entry is in the extreme northwest of the map, which means it's kind of logically the last place that the players are going to explore and find when they go through that first level, that top level of the adventure. So by the time they got to that stairwell, there were some players who said, well, we've explored all of the above ground area. We found some other secret doors, but there's no reason to go back to them because we just found this stairwell. Let's just go down this stairwell. So just something to be aware of and look out for. There is a means for the players to skip the second floor and go straight to the third, and they may not be ready for that. Now, another issue that I faced, and this is not like a really hard mechanical issue, but there was often conversation about how can this place exist only a 20-minute walk away from a city? Like, how can the people in Otari not know that there's this giant multi-level dungeon filled of monsters and nasty things that want to kill them, and not know about it? And how have, it's been 500 years. How have these creatures not come topside and attacked Otari in 500 years? And some other common questions about dungeon ecology. Where do they get their food, and how can they be content just staying on the same floor for their entire lives, and so on and so forth. And there are some explanations in the adventure for some of that. For example, the lowest floors of the Abomination Vault, I think one of the floors is completely dedicated, or almost completely dedicated, to a farm to feed people in the lower levels. So there is some nod to ecology, and some of the other ecology, not so much food, but just social interactions. The adventure goes to some lengths to explain that there are little pockets of society within the different levels of the Abomination Vaults, and they have clear reasons for staying in their areas and not venturing out. As for why the monsters haven't all flooded into the top world, I think a simple explanation would be that all but one of the passages to the top side, if you're going straight from the second floor to the ground level, are hidden doors, and so it's completely possible that even over 500 years, nobody down there found those secret passages to give them access to the world above. Now, that does leave the one that is not hidden, and it's kind of guarded by a giant undead leech called the Blood Siphon. So I think it's possible that, maybe some creatures did venture up that stairwell and never went back. And so the other creatures decided not to pursue that particular route any further. If I was to do it again, I think I might even paint messages on the staircase at the bottom. Do not enter, do not go up, danger, as just a sign that, monsters have identified that passage leads to danger, and that's why they don't go up it, and therefore don't ever find the route to the top side. Also, each of the different groups in the Abomination Vaults might have their own reasons for not really caring to go to the world above. Creatures native to the Darklands probably prefer the Darklands and don't care to go up above. The Morlocks, who inhabit some of the higher floors of the Abomination Vaults, they hate light. So they probably wouldn't be interested in going out into the sunlight. And there could also just be the explanation that at the base of this structure, there is a temple to the dark goddess Nimbaloth, and there are a few creatures that have passages in the campaign that say, this creature senses the spirit of Nimbaloth and the echoes of her power and feel drawn to it, and that's what keeps them in this area. Or sensing echoes of Belcorra's ghost, and that entices them to stay nearby because they feel warmth and comfort from these dark powers. That could be another explanation as to why the monsters don't ever go topside and cause trouble for Otari. And probably the biggest issue or problem I had with the campaign so far running it is that there are several creatures in the Abomination Vaults who are able to be treated with, that you can use diplomacy with, that you can interact with and potentially even ally with. There are several of these creatures who can even give the players side quests to perform while they're in the Abomination Vaults. And that's all great. And that's wonderful because it breaks up that dungeon exploration mode where people just want to explore dungeons and be murder hobos. But that's also the issue here, because all of these creatures look monstrous. And it didn't take my players very long to get into the mode of basically being a SWAT team. Like, they have their they know what they're going to do. They come to a door. This player's going to position here. This player's going to position here. This player's going to open the door, and then we're going to have our archer in the center back with a ready to action to shoot at whatever they see on the other side of that door. And so every single opportunity that they encountered a creature within the Abomination Vaults that they could have interacted with and had a conversation with and learned some backstory and got a side quest and treated with, all of that went out the window. The second the door opens, they see something that looks like a devil and they fire their bow because that was their ready to action when they opened the door. Now, I don't want to punish them for doing that because I think that's kind of good tactics, good strategy, and they're putting some thought into what they're doing. But the downside is it completely removed any opportunity for them to peacefully interact with the residents of the Abomination Vaults. And I know I'm not alone in this. I believe 2 other people in the comments of the first video expressed the same thing. And asked for suggestions on how to possibly deal with this. And I may not have the best answers, but I'll try to share what I can. First is a suggestion that was offered by somebody else in the comments, which is use visual storytelling as the players are approaching one of these doors. Do something in the environment to signal that maybe what's on the other side of the door is a little different than normal. Like what if one of the creatures was listening to a music box, and the players coming down the hall could hear the music box, and that might signal to them that the person on the other side of the door isn't a mindless brutish monster. They may not immediately go to shoot whatever I see on the other side of the door, especially if the sound of a music box conjures images of a peaceful child or something like that, somebody who's not necessarily going to want to rip your face off at first opportunity. That brief moment might give a chance for the players to use diplomacy and some other peaceful interactions. Another thought is leave journals scattered about the different floors, and the journals could mention in some way that the person in this room we think might not have the same interests at heart as the rest of us. And that could signal like, oh, this person may not be as vile as the rest, or maybe be open to negotiation, whereas the rest of their tribe, their group, or whatever is more barbaric. Something to signal to the players that these particular doors are different, and that they may not necessarily want to just fall back on the tried and true method of open the door and shoot whatever you see with the bow and get into a fight. Those are the suggestions that I have. I will say this is an area that I still continue to have a little bit of a struggle with. So if all of you out there watching, if you have suggestions on how to help signal to the players or to get them out of that mode of being the SWAT team who kicks in the door and starts shooting, a very violent SWAT team, then let me know. Share those in the comments, and hopefully you can help me and help others who are facing the same situation. So next, let's take a look at some of the questions that were asked in the comments of the first video. But before I get into that, I just want to mention that the official forums are fantastic. A lot of questions you might have are probably already answered there. And if not, there's usually some folks who are more than happy to jump in and give you an answer. Also, there are specific GM focused threads that are sticky to the top, and they have all kinds of great resources, great feedback. Some of them have homemade maps and all kinds of other utilities you might want to use. And for example, sometimes the designers themselves will pop into those threads. In the GM sticky thread for book one, one of the designers answers a question about the teleporters that are in area C5 of the adventure, and apparently something got mixed up between when he wrote that section and when that section got published, because the portals in that area do not function the way he intended. So you can go check out that thread and see how those portals are supposed to function. Also, in the thread for the second book, there's a great conversation about the signature items of the Roseguard. In the second adventure, in order to progress to, I believe, floor 5 and below, the players will have to discover and collect a signature item from all 4 members of the Roseguard. And 3 of these items are weapons. And the issue here is they're all like 4th, 5th level appropriate items, whereas the Roseguard defeated Belcorra, who's a amazingly powerful sorcerer. How did they defeat her if they were using weapons that were suitable for 4th or 5th level players? And does that kind of break a little bit of the immersion? So there was this discussion brought up some ideas. One of them that I will share, and that was endorsed by one of the designers in that thread, is to turn those signature items into relics and allow those weapons to level up with the players as they adventure through the 3 books of the campaign. And that way, when they hit 10th level and they are having their final confrontation with Belcorra, those signature weapons will have regained their lost power and be the great weapons that were used by the Roseguard. There's a couple of different ways narratively you can spin that. I think one of the key things you would need to do is replace the lockpicks that are Otari's. In the normal adventure, his lockpicks are his signature item. But for the relic, we would need it to be like a weapon. So instead, replace that with his dagger that is found on a Minotaur skeleton in the Abomination Vaults, and make that his signature item. And then just turn those into relics for your players. And there's all kinds of other great tips you can find in those forums. But as to specific questions I was asked, easily the most common question that came up was about, should you go straight into Abomination Vaults, or should you do the beginner box and Trouble in Otari first, as they also take place in Otari, and then go into Abomination Vaults? The beginner box takes you from 1st to 2nd level, and Troubles in Otari takes you from 2nd to, I believe, 5th. And Abomination Vault starts at 1st. So for me, I didn't do the beginner box or Troubles in Otari. I went straight into Abomination Vaults. It worked great. I think if you have new players, starting with the beginner box that is designed to teach the game to brand new people, and then moving into Abomination Vaults would be a great idea. Yes, they will be slightly over-leveled going into Abomination Vaults. They'll be 2nd level doing 1st level material, but that should be fairly short-lived, and if they're brand new players, they may still need a little bit of extra help to get them situated into the campaign proper. I think the only area that would really be a challenge is if you do the beginner box and do all of Troubles in Otari, and therefore your 5th level, which means you're level appropriate to skip over book 1 and go into book 2. Which, obviously I would not recommend skipping book 1, but that creates the dilemma of what do you do during book 1 when you are vastly overpowered for the content. And one of the suggestions that came up in the comments of the previous video was for the content that's Troubles in Otari. And as it overlaps into the beginning of Abomination Vaults, try to find ways to give rewards that are not experience points. So as the players start to outlevel the content, stop giving them experience points, find another way to reward them for the play, and then once they've caught up, go back to experience points and alternate that until they complete Menace at Otari and through the first book of Abomination Vaults. So some suggestions for how to handle that might be using the reputation system from the Game Mastery Guide. Give them stats for reputation that they're building in Otari, and there could be small boons they get from the residents of Otari as they are building their fame and their reputation there. And you could use the victory point system and some other means. I will say that none of these suggestions are particularly easy to implement. I think there will be challenges involved to do that. I would say, especially if you are a newer GM, I would personally either just go straight to Abomination Vaults or do the beginner box and then to Abomination Vaults. I have never played nor GM'd Trouble in Otari, but from what I've read of it, I don't think there's anything in there that you just have to do, that you're just going to completely miss out on the Abomination Vaults experience or the Otari experience if you don't do it. If you have had a different experience, please let me know in the comments. If you think that playing through all 3 of those pieces is fundamentally needed to understand and experience the story of Otari and to appreciate it, then let me know. Like I said, I've not actually played Trouble, so I may not have the same view on that as some of you do. Another question that came up was about a haunt within Abomination Vaults called the Blood of Belcorra. And that is a specific haunt. There was also questions about haunts in general. New players, especially if they're coming from 5th edition or some other D20-based fantasy RPGs, have trouble grasping haunts as they exist in Pathfinder because they're not really represented the same way in other systems. And so they try to fight their way through the haunts, so to speak, and don't fully appreciate that these are just a form of magical trap, and they don't think of them as traps. They think of them as ghosts to be fought, and that can create challenges, difficulties, and frustrations. There is a haunt in the first book of the Adventure Path where the ghosts of some of the kobolds who were killed in the ruins of Gauntlight, their spirits in ghostly forms can be awakened in a haunt. And as soon as the players see 3 kobold ghosts, they immediately say, I'm going to attack the ghosts because they've played these games before. No, you can fight ghosts. And I realize that, well, these aren't creatures, these aren't ghosts, this is a haunt, and it looks the same, but it's different. So first off, my recommendation is to have conversations with your players, and if you can do it within the narrative that's preferred. So if they encounter the haunt and you have a cleric or other divinely powered character in the group, just go straight to making a religion knowledge check. And if you're doing secret checks, feel free to fudge this check and tell them, wow, you rolled really high, so let me tell you what's happening here. these are not ghosts you can fight. You know that this is a haunt. And kind of hold their hand through that first haunt so that they get the idea. Now, the second haunt they're likely to face is the Blood of Belcorra haunt, and this is a particularly nasty haunt. And one of the specific questions I was asked was, is this as bad as it seems? And yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. This haunt, it deals persistent bleed damage. So if the players fail their saves against it, no damage happens immediately, but on those players' turns, at the end of those players' turns, they're going to suffer some pretty heavy persistent bleed damage. And that bleed damage is going to reoccur every single turn at the end of their rounds until they either pass a DC 15 flat check or until they are healed to their maximum. The bleed doesn't stop if they receive any healing. By Raw, you have to be healed all the way up to your maximum health in order for that bleed damage to stop. So for brand new characters and players, this is really, really, really nasty. I'll also mention that if you view this encounter in the hardback collection of the campaign, the original print run were 3 individual paperback soft covers, and they released it as all one collection in one hardback volume. In that hardback volume, they clarified by spelling out that this is not just bleed damage, but in the new version, they go the extra mile to say this is persistent bleed damage. And this is also unusual because typically with bleed damage, you would suffer, 1d6 slashing damage plus an additional 1d4 persistent bleed damage. But in this particular case, there is no base upfront damage. It's just pure persistent damage. Also, while I'm on the topic of them reprinting this encounter, in the reprint of the collected version, they clarify that the stealth bonus of this hazard is a plus 13, not a plus 23. In the original release, they said plus 23, which I think they just accidentally put the plus 23 when they meant to say it was a stealth DC of 23. But at any rate, the question was, is this hazard as nasty as it sounds? And yes, it absolutely is. My players, we got lucky. They spotted the trap and or the hazard, and they were able to, their rogue was able to clean away the blood and disable the hazard. And so they didn't face this in my game, but just FYI, yeah, this could be very bad in your game. And speaking of difficult encounters, several people asked about a particular encounter at the end of Book 1 involving a creature called the Voidglutton. And this is, it seems like from looking at the forums, the most infamous, most notorious battle in the entire campaign and it's at the end of Book 1. The Voidglutton encounter is an extreme difficulty encounter. It is a level 8 creature, and it has heavy stats even for a level 8 creature, and it's scripted to be encountered by a level 4 party of adventurers. 8th level creature, armor class of 30. It's kind of a will-o-wisp on steroids. So it has magical immunities. It's immune to all spells except a handful of spells like Glitter Dust, Fairy Fire, Magic Missile, and any spell that has the light trait on it. It is just a top to bottom nasty, nasty fight. A lot of people on the official forums express that this is a near guarantee TPK for a level 4 party. So, what should we do? What are the recommendations? I think first thing we need to just acknowledge the possibility of is that perhaps this isn't necessarily meant to be a fight you win at 4th level. This kind of the old school, first ed D&D mentality that I have, that sometimes it's good to encounter something that's so challenging that you need to flee from. In fact, the text for this particular monster, it spells out that the Voidglutton will not pursue you if you try to escape. And it very darkly says something to the effect of, if one of the players collapses, it may be its attention may be so firm on feeding on that creature that it ignores the rest of the party temporarily, or something to that effect. And it even has an ability that lets it heal 1d4 hit points every turn, and yeah, it's an ugly creature. So I'll just put out there the possibility that it might be good to have relatively new players encounter something that after the first round or two, they say, forget this, we're backing out the door, slamming the door shut, and we're going someplace else. Now, this is very late in book one. My players have not encountered it yet, so I don't know how they'll react. I don't know how it will work out. I don't believe there's anything in the room or cluster of rooms that the Voidglutton inhabits that you have to complete the adventure. There is a +1 striking composite longbow there, which is a very nice piece of treasure, which is a great reward if you are able to conquer the Voidglutton. But I'll just put out there that just maybe it's okay to not win that fight, and it's okay to back away and to flee from it. And it probably will not break your game if the players go that route. Now, that said, most of the advice online has focused on getting the players to 5th level sooner. If you know that the Voidglutton fight is coming up, and I believe that the Voidglutton is behind a secret door, so there's no guarantee that they're going to find the secret door, there's no guarantee they're going to find this fight, but if it's coming up and is a possibility, perhaps consider leveling them up to 5th level a little sooner, so that it's at least within the realm of possibility that they could defeat the Voidglutton. But anyway you cut it, it's going to be an ugly, 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 nasty fight. I checked the collected version, the hardback version, and I believe the fight is scripted the same way there. It's still an 8th level creature. It's still armor class 30. It still can heal on every turn. So I don't think that the designers of the campaign backed away from that in the time between releasing it initially and doing the collection. So I think, it's supposed to be a really, really ugly, nasty fight. If you have encountered the Voidglutton and your players have found great creative ways to either navigate around it or defeat it, please share in the comments. I'm sure other folks would love to hear about your experiences. But answering the question that was written, which was basically, the Voidglutton, is it as ugly as it seems? Yes, it's very, very ugly. Is it unfair? That depends on your definition of fair. I think it would be wise for players to flee from it, and not feel like that is necessarily a bad thing. So there you go, video 2 of my overview for Abomination Vaults. My subjective opinion is it looks like a really, really, really great adventure path. I love that it's a dungeon crawl. I love that it's only 3 books and not 6 books. I love that it takes place close to Absalom, so at the end of it, I can move my players straight into Stolen Fate, which is another adventure path I'm really, really interested in. And aside from a few little hiccups, I think it runs very, very smoothly. If you have further questions, please leave those in the comments. If you have suggestions for how to deal with any of the issues that were brought up in this video, please leave that in the comments as well. And as always, I want to take a quick moment to say thank you to everybody out there who supports me in this channel, whether that's by clicking the like button, subscribing to the Patreon, subscribing to this channel, leaving your thoughts and comments. I appreciate everything you folks do to support me. And with that, thanks for watching, take care, and happy gaming.